How does southeastern Wisconsin fit into this national election picture?
I mean, it's battleground zero, right? We've always been a battleground, but always at the end of these elections, it seems to have faded away, and other states have become more focused. I think Wisconsin is a great place, and I think that even when we have differences, we can have a beer and a brat, right?
Roughly half of America's voters live in the suburbs, and in the final months of the campaign, as President Trump seeks to boost his support in those communities, he has zeroed in on the threat of violent crime.
The suburbs are coming big to us because the suburbs are next. If you elected this guy, the suburbs would be overwhelmed with violence and crime.
And Wisconsin, a swing state, is likely to be some of the most fought over ground. In 2016, President Trump won here by fewer than 23,000 votes.
He will win Wisconsin with its 10 electoral votes. He's cracked the so-called blue wall.
A Marquette Law School poll of likely Wisconsin voters from early September showed former Vice President Joe Biden leading President Trump 47% to 43%. 3 suburban counties around Milwaukee serve as a GOP counterweight to the traditionally large Democratic margins recorded in the state's 2 largest cities, Milwaukee and Madison. The president will likely need to win big in the suburban counties if he wants to take the state again. We sat down with a group of voters from Waukesha and Ozaukee counties, half voted for Trump and half voted for Clinton in 2016, to discuss the coronavirus pandemic, the economy, policing, and how they are weighing a sudden Supreme Court vacancy as they think about November's election. Did anybody really sort of struggle with that decision in 2016?
I actually voted Republican in 2008 and 2012. And then in 2016, I voted Democrat for the first time. And my case was because of the person instead of the party. I couldn't vote for Donald Trump.
Raise your hands if you plan to vote for President Trump between now and November. And who plans to vote for Joe Biden? Sabrina, it seemed like your hand raise on Joe Biden was a little bit lukewarm.
Yes, I do want him to show up more strongly on some issues, so I'm still listening closely.
He might not get your vote?
It's completely possible, yes.
On Memorial Day weekend, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, a neighboring state to Wisconsin, and then subsequently in the summer, another man was shot in Kenosha by police. I want to get your sense for sort of the Black Lives Matter movement. There's been calls for police reform. It's obviously a challenging topic to talk about race in America, but let's try to talk about it a little bit and see where you're feeling in terms of how these protests have gone. Sometimes they've moved into riots, and what you think should be done in terms of police reform.
There's over 700,000 law enforcement in the country right now. That we can expect those human beings in those situations, those conditions, with that responsibility to act flawlessly is ridiculous. And what is even more childish, just think that we can improve that by reducing the amount of law enforcement. It's super unfortunate that there are situations like Floyd that do arise, but when it comes to the numbers itself and the interaction and the people we're dealing with, they are people. There could be a little bit more reform in terms of making people accountable for their jobs in the proper way, and making sure they're not on the force if they're not capable.
Sabrina, you've talked a little bit about the segregation that exists in this metropolitan area. What is your take?
It would be hypocritical to be an American per se and not understand that we have a history of violence in this country. Unfortunately, change has come through violence. It's not the way that I want it to be. I'd love to come to the table and talk it out and just get rid of the ills of our country, but that's not what happens. So understanding that racism has seeped into so many parts of our country, it's just as American as apple pie, right? There has to be reform within healthcare. There has to be reform within housing. There has to be reform within the criminal justice system. There has to be reform in immigration. We have all these areas that we have to dismantle racism in, become aware of our unconscious bias, and choose justice.
When they talk about, well, only a few people have been shot or killed or whatever, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's really a lot more than just a few bad apples. It's really systematic. I do feel, that Trump really incites the violence and incites the divisiveness and incites a lot of the hate.
The root of the problem is systemic racism. We can't just turn a blind eye and say, oh, everything's fine. And it starts with opportunities and the economy. Like you said, we have a segregated city. Look at the resources we're providing to the south side and the north side of Milwaukee versus, a predominantly, white area like Brookfield, and Waukesha County. The resources are, day and night. How do we expect people to be okay?
Sue, your turn. What are your observations about the summer of unrest that took place in this country?
Well, I guess I don't understand why people think it's Trump's fault that all this is going on. I was always taught as a young child growing up that if a police officer tells you to stop, you stop. I don't care what color you are, black, white, yellow, or purple. These people deal with people that are on drugs, people that are crazy. And so I could see how some of these police officers are on edge. Now, are some of them taking it way too far? Yes, I do believe so. And I'm not saying they were right in what I think is torturing George Floyd. That certainly is not right. But there needs to be a little bit of acceptance on both sides that both sides did wrong.
Tamir Rice was shot before he had any chance to respond to any kind of police order. So the narrative that people aren't following directions isn't completely true, unfortunately. I've had police approach me where their hands are literally on their weapon as they're coming up to me. And my kids are right there seeing this. So it's not that folks are necessarily attempting to not listen to police. I think that narrative has to go.
My father is a retired police officer, so I have the utmost respect for police. And I think a big problem too is a lot of the words we use, the terminology, defund the police. That's a bad term. I wish nobody had put that term out there. It's not about taking away money or taking away police officers. It's really, most of us want better education for police officers. We want more support for them. Some social workers coming in on some of these calls.
Sabrina, can you just talk a little bit about your vote and how you are feeling about former Vice President Joe Biden?
I do feel like Joe Biden recently, he started a campaign, or at least his team started a campaign of being more harsh on, the rioting. When I think about Philando Castile and being murdered in Minnesota, and then I think about what happened with George Floyd being murdered in Minnesota. Again, same place, same kind of injustice, but there wasn't really change or a movement until George Floyd was murdered and the public had an uprising. Same state. So people don't listen until things get out of hand, per se. So I really don't like the messaging of Joe Biden. I do want him to stand with the fact that there's injustice that needs to be fixed. There are people being crushed underneath these systems, and they are Americans also. And when we say defund the police, we definitely mean it. I don't want to lose that message either. We do mean defund the police. They do. Because we want systems that actually do support people in the ways that policing cannot.
We're sitting down just days after the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, leaving a seat open on the Supreme Court. How many of you think that seat should be filled still during Donald Trump's first term?
Well, obviously, we have a constitution. It's by the advice and consent of the Senate. The Senate is Republican. If the president wants to put forward his nominee, he has his right. He's still the president until January.
Well, I agree with Chris. I'm going to qualify it, though, as one thing that concerns me the most is what implications will be on the election if, in fact, President Trump and the Senate goes forward with the nomination. I'd hate to think that pushing this forward would put President Trump's reelection at risk, or some of the senators are up for reelection.
Sabrina, talk a little bit about why you don't think it should be filled this year.
Just looking at the last example of the way that Republicans stood up and said, no, Barack Obama cannot bring somebody into this role when he had more time than this one, then I would say the same thing.
Let's pivot to a subject that really has dominated, obviously, all of our lives practically all year, and that's the pandemic. How many of you routinely wear a mask when you go out in public, pretty much anywhere?
Well, it depends. I mean, if I'm going
Depends.
to a place where I know there's going to be a lot of people there, of course I will wear a mask. But if I'm taking my dogs for a walk by myself, I'm not going to put a mask on.
Well, again, it goes back to the inconsistent messaging about the effectiveness of masks. There's like a virtual signaling issue with masks out there at this point as well. It does come down to sort of what are our rights as citizens.
The president has talked about having a vaccine potentially in time for the election. What do you all think of that? Who do you believe when it comes to the vaccine?
To try to get a vaccine out and mass produced and available in a matter of weeks or months is not possible. It's not safe.
Who all do you listen to in terms of trusting what to know about the vaccine? Who do you trust in terms of that topic?
I think it was hard when the CDC came out or somebody came out and originally said masks don't help, don't use masks. And that made it really hard for a lot of people to trust. But I think we didn't know what we didn't know, and we shouldn't have assumed that we knew something. I still listen to Fauci. I try to trust the CDC. I think unfortunately they've been influenced politically when they shouldn't be, but I think they're still a reputable source.
Chris, who do you trust on this topic?
Well, it's what's stunning to me, I think, is doctors are starting to sound like lawyers. There's a lot of different opinions and none of them seem to agree, which always worries me. My nephew was just diagnosed with COVID, asymptomatic, no issues. I have two assistants. One of my assistants got COVID. So it's affected me personally, but I'm not sure who to believe on it.
Has anybody on the panel lost a job or significant piece of income because of the pandemic?
So I own a private practice, optometric practice. Sure. And so we were forced to close. So I ended up having to lay off my entire staff.
Are you open again?
Yeah.
Give me your sense for how you think President Trump has handled this situation.
I think he's done a good job as far as letting the states determine, each individual state, on how they want to handle it. Because, when New York was being so burdened, Wisconsin had nothing.
We can't blame Trump for the virus, of course. And I don't even really blame him for his initial actions or inactions. But I think now, especially 6 months plus later, holding and having these rallies, political rallies with hundreds of people or sometimes even thousands in a closed space, without masks, and him continuing to, taunt people or make fun of people who wear masks, including Joe Biden. I think to me, that is probably what bothers me the most.
We should not have this many people in the United States who died from this. So the response was not quick enough. It was not to the degree that it should have been. And it had disproportionate outcomes for different communities. There's more Black folks who have died from this. There are more Latinos who are dying from this. This is not fair.
How about your local and state officials? Do you feel like they've done a better or worse job than Washington on this issue?
It's very inconsistent, which creates confusion. We literally have school districts within Ozaukee County that have different policies about how they're handling kids going back to school. What makes Port Washington different from Mequon?
You have the liberal areas saying, science, shut down, forget the economy, everyone's dying. Conservative areas are saying, open it up, we got to have an economy, freedom. And those neighborhoods are very close to each other. So it's kind of like within 5 minutes, you can be in 3 different zones of opinion. I generally follow the policy of what my client wants. So when my client shows up in a mask, I put on a mask. If my client asks me to take it off, I take it off.
Everybody thinks that agrees. Everything has been politicized. When I see clients, I wear a mask. My clients wear a mask in my office. I have, hand sanitizer, not because I'm afraid. I'd rather be on the safe side. Why take a chance? Why would I want to be responsible of infecting somebody and that person potentially could die because of how I do things. So and I definitely don't want the economy shut down. I want to see customers. I want to take care of them. I'll see them in my office anytime, any day. But with the proper precaution.
The economy and the pandemic are very much intertwined. Chris, talk a little bit about, your real estate business and what you've seen.
When the pandemic started, I was very nervous and braced for the worst. The real estate economy, which to me has always been an indicator, obviously for me personally, it's my business. has been amazing.
Raise your hand if you thought the economy was pretty good in January and February. Everybody else has their hands up, other than Sabrina. She's still kind of not sure that the economy was that great. Now, raise your hand again if you're satisfied with the economy as it is today.
I think so many people, I feel, look at the stock market as the economy or what it's in your 401k. But when you look at Milwaukee, the economic inequities, the average suburban, those of us in these counties, maybe our economy or whatever is fine. But when you look at the city of Milwaukee in certain areas, I don't think our economy is fine.
Bernie, you work with a lot of immigrants. What's your take on sort of how new immigrants are doing in the economy right now?
Definitely not doing very well because, well, number one, a lot of the immigrants didn't qualify for the stimulus checks. So overall, a lot of the huge Latino community is impacted negatively.
Sue, what is your sense as a business owner, just for the economy sort of writ large in your area?
The economy, yes, is coming back. Is it back 100%? In certain fields, I believe it is, but certain fields, it is nowhere near 100%. You start having people lose their jobs, then they lose their insurance. It's all a chain reaction or a trickle-down effect. If we don't save our economy, it's going to affect many, many more lives than this pandemic will. So I do believe that we need to be very protective of our economy and get things moving. Yes, do it safely, but we cannot just keep, we can't all lock ourselves in and shut everything down. It's just going to be a disaster.
We've gleaned tonight that there's division here in the suburbs of Milwaukee, differing opinions, not unlike the rest of the country. Some of you who have lived in the area for longer times. Can you just talk about how the area is changing, and sort of if you sense more political division as the area has diversified?
This community was always very Republican, and now it's, there's Biden signs out there. I think it's very divided within neighborhoods, which we've never seen before.
Other than when I was serving in different duty stations, I've always came back to Waukesha, and I've been since '89. At that time, there was very few Latino families. It's grown tremendously over the years. Traditionally, the Latinos vote more Democrat.
Being aware of the history of Wisconsin and the redlining that caused the suburbs to stay so white, and how those barriers are starting to be removed and allowing people to move out into areas really allows for a diversity to exist. And I do appreciate the fact that there's different voices to speak to, different people who are available. I do like different ideas.
The question isn't necessarily whether Trump will win these suburban Milwaukee counties. He probably will. But it'll depend on how much margin he gets and then how that affects the overall statewide totals here in Wisconsin. What do you guys think?
I see a lot of leadership pushing people to register and to vote. And if we get everybody coming out and we increase the voting, we already got a Democrat governor, last time. So we actually, I think that it's going blue. And I see that trend. So as long as people get out and vote, I think Trump will lose in this state.
Chris, what's going to happen in Wisconsin?
I think Trump will do very well in Waukesha County and Washington County. Ozaukee County is the one that is, I think, the closest. The question will there be enough votes in rural Wisconsin to offset the huge turnout in Madison and Milwaukee? And that's usually the game. I think Trump will win, and I'm counting on it. I'm nervous, but I'm hopeful.